This is one of the most important positions in Rook Endings. It arises very often and we have to have this basic fundamental knowledge. So white is trying to promote a pawn or checkmate the black king. So there is only one move that wins here, and that is king f6. Because if check, then we go here, threatening to give a checkmate, and pawn will promote. And if we go here, then he can check. We have to go back. So this is the only way to win. Black can try this to check from this side, but we chase away the king, give a check, chase away the king again, and now we can freely push a pawn. He can give this check, but we move away, and we approach a rook, attack it, and we get a new queen. So this is a famous Philidor position. Must know if you want to defend against this pawn. So what do? You put a rook on 6th rank, not allow the king to advance. And if he moves the pawn, then we go behind the king as far as we can, and king cannot hide from our checks. So he tries this, but we check. He goes here, you give a check again, and you just keep checking forever. And if he tries to go after the rook, he's gonna lose this pawn. So here we cannot bring our rook to the 6th rank, which is a Philidor position, the way to defend, but we have another defensive resource. So we put our rook behind the pawn, and when white threatens a mate in 1, then we go to the short side of the pawn. So you see here, this is the short side and this is the long side, and you will see why in a minute. Okay, he checks, the only move, rook d8. So his idea is to play king e7 and push a pawn. And now we go to the long side with the rook. The reason why we want long side, we want to be able to check a king from afar, so he cannot reach us. And if the rook wants to block the checks, then we go back, because rook is not longer defending the pawn, so we can stop it with the king and the rook. Let's see, king e6, so he wants to push the pawn, but now king c7. And we stop a pawn with the rook and the king. So let's see, we saw a similar position in the previous lessons. So how does white win here? We get in front of the pawn, and if black rook was on e1, it would be a draw. But he does not have a time to put the rook behind the pawn, because we are threatening mate in 1. So he tries to go to the short side, but now we chase away a king and go up. So if rook was on e1, we wouldn't be able to go up, because this pawn would fall. So now he tries to go to the long side to give checks. We advance our pawn, check, check. If rook was here, then it would be a draw, but that's not possible because our rook is on a file. He can try attacking a pawn, but then we approach and he has to move and we push a pawn and promote. If he tries king f6, then rook f8 wins the rook. Black can try passive defense, and that is to stay with the rook on the initial rank, and when we advance our pawn, he will start giving checks. So the only way to make a progress for white is to play rook b7. And let's say rook sits on the initial rank. Now we give this check, king goes here, king h7. Now we threaten to win a rook. He comes back, but we give a check and we win. The knight pawn is an exception. Even though black has his rook behind the pawn, white is winning, because there is no short side of the board for the black king to escape. So king g6, threatening mate, king f8, check, driving off the king. And now most difficult move to find, rook g8, defending a pawn, so white king can advance. Black rook waits, king h7, king attacks, but we give a check. Now black is threatening mate, so we give another check. Black attacks the rook, and now g7, protecting and threatening to get a new queen. Check, king g8, and now this is lucena position. In one of the next lessons, we will learn how to win this position. In the previous lesson, we saw that putting our rook behind the pawn does not work when the pawn is a knight pawn. White is threatening rook b8 and g6, but because a pawn is a knight pawn, we have a surprising defense, rook f8. So with the knight pawn, passive defense actually works. Let's see why. g6, we wait, check, check, and white cannot make progress. If pawn was here, then he would have this check, we go here and he picks up a rook. Obviously white cannot play g7 because of check, and we win a game. So in this lesson, we're gonna learn one of the most important technique in Rook Endgames. So this is a lucena position, and we win by building a bridge. and you will see in a minute what does that mean. So white is in the ideal position, his king is in front of the pawn, and white pawn needs only one push to become a queen. So we play funny looking move rook f4, and you will see a point of this move in a minute. So black waits, we chase away a king, so our king can get out. Now we get out with a king. Now black starts giving checks, we walk our king down, and finally we see the point of rook f4, we block, and there is no stopping, white gets new queen. This method works almost always, exception is a rook pawn. Rook pawn is an exception in many cases, as we have already seen. Okay, again we have lucena position. Let's practice it a little bit more. So we cut off the king. If he goes here, then we promote the pawn this way, so he steps aside. But then rook on the 4th rank, black waits, check. And now if king tries to wait, we just put rook on the g file and pawn promotes. So black king is cut off from the pawn by one file, and that is usually bad, but because white pawn hasn't advanced very far, black can draw this position. So the only way to draw this is to use defense frontal checks. So we go to the 8th rank, and when the king advances, we just give checks. And we are far away, he cannot reach us. Now we attack the pawn, he defends it, but now king attacks the rook. Rook gives a check, we go back. Of course he cannot advance it, because he will lose a rook. So king goes back, but we continue with the checks. And now we use a drawing idea, rook f7, and if he pushes his pawn, then rook e7. Exchanging rooks, and after the exchange, we have a drawn pawn ending that I explained in pawn ending course. So here we see the fight between rooks and pawns, and we're gonna learn really important rule that applies in a lot of rook endings, and that is that rooks belong behind the pawns. So the way to defend this is to go all the way up, and now these pawns are under the control of the king, and this pawn is really hard to promote because rook will just check king. Because rook is so far away, black king cannot attack it. Now we attack the pawn. He has to go back, we give a check. If he tries to hide behind the pawn, then we can just wait. And he has to give up the rest of these pawns, and it's a stalemate. Sometimes you cannot get behind the pawn in time, so you have to use another way, because black is threatening to promote a pawn quickly. But there is another way to draw this game. So we play rook f1, and now the goal is to give these checks. Because black needs his king to be on b2 to promote the pawn. But as soon as black king goes to b2, we can give a check, and so on. So king b2, check, and we do it forever. White is close to queening, but black has a rook. Can white make a draw? The only way to do it is queen d6, and this is called shouldering off. In this case, we are shouldering off the king. It's like when you push someone with the shoulder, so he cannot get close. In this case, close to the pawn. Now we want to play king d7 and get a new queen. Black tries king b7, but we continue shouldering off king d7. Black can try a check, but we go back, and there is nothing better for black than to repeat. So again we have a shoulder technique. This one is tricky. White is gonna promote this pawn, and black has to give up a rook for it, so he has to be fast and promote his pawn as well. So the first one is trickiest, king e4, going as forward as we can, preparing to shoulder off the king. Pawn advances, we push, we have to take the queen, and now we push a pawn, we go up. Of course we don't go in front of the pawn to block it, but to e3, now push, we repeat, check, and now this last trick, white is threatening mate, so we get a knight. And this is a draw, because this knight cannot be trapped. Here we see another shouldering idea. It seems like white king is already out of the game, but that's not the case. So king d6, he's trying to go down, give a check, and put the black king in front of the pawn. So let's see, g4, now threatening rook f8, again taking the opposition, and now finally check. This is an easy win now. Black can try one trick to go here, we attack it, he pushes, we attack it again, and then this move. So if we take with the rook, it's gonna be a stalemate, but we just play king f2 and the game is over. So if we put one more pawn on the board, let's see how that changes the situation. So often we will win against isolated pawns because they cannot support each other. So it is tempting to take this pawn, but then this pawn is too fast. So we attack dangerous pawn. When he defends it, we take the opposition, follow the king, and now we push the king. We still follow the king, and now we cannot make progress with the king, so we attack the other pawn to force the king to defend it, and now we go in with the king. Again, after the check, this is winning too, but this is easier, just keeping the opposition, and after the check, this pawn is gonna fall, and this is gonna fall soon as well. So this one is interesting. We have rook against connected passed pawns. Black rook looks well placed, and king is also close to the pawns, and white king cut off. But passed pawns are really dangerous. g6. There is a rule that two connected passed pawns on the 6th rank are stronger than the rook. Here even f7 works, and you can check it for yourself. Now rook gives the check. Any move wins for white now, but it's better to attack the rook and force it to move. Rook c8, and now any pawn push wins. Let's say f7, king f5, and g7. Again, rook against two connected pawns, but this example is a little bit trickier. First, we take diagonal opposition to try to shoulder off the king as much as we can. Now we protect the pawn because we want to advance this one. Okay, g6 now, finally. Now we have two pawns on the 6th, which we know are stronger than a rook. So check, we go away from the pawn because we don't want to interfere. They can promote on their own. Rook attacks the pawn, g7 obviously. And now the most important move, going away from the pawns, believe it or not. So the problem of advancing is that we cannot advance now because of this. So that's why we go away from the pawns, not to interfere. We are threatening to go here and then push, or actually push right away. So we want to push this pawn now. And if he gives a check, we can go here. And if we push a pawn right away, then check, and we have to go up. And we're losing this pawn. That's why going here, black king doesn't allow us to escape, but now we go forward. And because we went c6 on the last move, now this king is far away from the pawns. He tries to get closer, but it is too late. There is one more trick, threatening checkmate, but we get a new knight, and then a new queen. So now we have knight and rook pawn, which changes things a little bit. It looks even easier than the last one, because rook is not behind the pawns and king is far away. But actually, this example shows that we do not follow blindly general principles. We have to calculate. So the wrong approach is to go and try to shoulder off the king by playing this move. Because of this variation, this is one sample line. We go in, attack a rook. But the problem is, when we push our pawns, king e6. And king f5, and if we promote, then you're gonna lose both pawns. So instead we go for a direct approach. We try to support our pawns and push them. And h7. So it's good to have general principle in mind, but you have to calculate variations. The last example is study by great Richard Reti, famous chess player and composer of endgame studies, and illustrates a lot of really useful ideas in the endgame. So the rook is attacked and black has the opposition, which means white cannot get around and attack a pawn. So that's why we play rook e2, brilliant move. And after e4, rook e1, we lose one move, so we have the opposition. And now black has to break the opposition, so now we have the opposition. And now we can get around the pawn. Black can try to push it, but the pawn cannot get away.